In the turbulent landscape of the 1850s, Geronimo, a prominent leader of the Chiricahua Apache, and his band sought refuge and trade opportunities across the border in Old Mexico. They had established a temporary peace treaty with the Mexican government, allowing them to camp outside a nearby town. This period of relative calm provided a brief respite for Geronimo and his people, who had faced continuous skirmishes with both Mexican forces and rival tribes. As the Apache camped peacefully, Geronimo and many of his warriors ventured into the town to engage in trade, leaving behind a few trusted companions to safeguard their camp. These excursions into Mexican territory were critical for acquiring goods that the Apache could not find in their arid homeland, such as tools, weapons, and food supplies. However, their good fortune was about to be shattered. Upon their return, the warriors were met not with the expected cheer of family and friends but with urgent cries from several women and children who had managed to flee. They delivered a harrowing message. Mexican troops had launched a brutal attack on the Apache camp while the men were away. A cold dread settled over Geronimo as he hurried back, his heart racing with fear for his family and kin. When Geronimo and his warriors finally arrived at their camp, the devastation was overwhelming. The once vibrant encampment now lay in ruins, littered with the remnants of their lives. The guard warriors, who had been left to protect their people, had been ruthlessly slain. Their horses, supplies, and weapons, vital to their survival, had been stolen or destroyed. The horror deepened as Geronimo surveyed the scene and discovered that many of the women and children, including his beloved wife, mother, and 3 children, lay dead among the carnage. The loss was catastrophic, marking a turning point in Geronimo's life. In that moment, the seeds of an unrelenting hatred for the Mexican people were sown within him. The very people who had once represented a potential for trade and peace had turned into a source of unimaginable grief and sorrow. The attack was allegedly ordered by Colonel Carrasco, who claimed it was a retaliatory strike for an earlier Apache raid. However, this justification did little to ease Geronimo's anguish or quell his thirst for vengeance. This tragic event not only shaped Geronimo's perspective but also redefined the trajectory of Apache resistance in the region. The attack ignited a fierce resolve within him to protect his people and seek revenge against those who had caused such suffering. As the years went by, Geronimo would become a symbol of resistance against Mexican and later American encroachment, embodying the spirit of the Apache warrior who would stop at nothing to defend his homeland and avenge his family. In the aftermath of the attack, Geronimo's life was forever altered. He transitioned from a leader seeking peace through trade to a relentless warrior driven by the need for retribution. His experiences fueled a lifelong commitment to his people, leading him to orchestrate raids against Mexican forces and defend Apache territory with unparalleled tenacity. The pain of loss transformed into a fiery passion for warfare, making Geronimo a formidable adversary. Ultimately, this personal tragedy became emblematic of the broader struggles faced by the Apache and other indigenous peoples during this tumultuous period in American history. Geronimo's legacy is intertwined with the story of a people fighting to preserve their way of life amidst overwhelming adversity, forever shaped by the violent encounters that defined their existence. The hatred that Geronimo felt for the Mexicans became a defining element of his identity, propelling him into a lifetime of conflict that would echo throughout the annals of history. Overwhelmed with grief following the massacre of his family, Geronimo adhered to Apache tradition by burning his family's belongings, a ritual meant to honor their memory and sever ties to the past. Afterward, he retreated into the forest, where he claimed to have heard a divine voice assuring him, "No gun will ever kill you. I will take the bullets from the guns and guide your arrows." This proclamation filled Geronimo with renewed purpose and determination. With this newfound resolve, Geronimo rallied a war party, and the Apache warriors set their sights on Mexico, where 8 companies of Mexican infantry awaited them, ready for battle. As Geronimo surveyed the battlefield, he recognized that some of the soldiers belonged to the same unit that had participated in the massacre of his loved ones. This realization fueled his rage and desire for vengeance. Given his profound personal loss and fierce spirit, Geronimo was chosen to lead the Apache into battle. With him at the forefront, the Apaches launched a fierce charge against the Mexican forces. Armed with nothing but a hunting knife, Geronimo surged forward, undeterred by the gunfire that erupted around him. Ignoring the danger, he plunged into the ranks of the enemy, slashing at those who had wronged him and his people. The ferocity of Geronimo's assault not only showcased his bravery but also symbolized the strength of the Apache spirit in the face of overwhelming odds. His leadership galvanized the warriors around him, turning their grief into a fierce, collective resolve to fight for their homeland and avenge their losses. Geronimo was born on June 16, 1829, in what is now Arizona, specifically in the Nodoy Canyon near present-day Clifton, Arizona. His birth name was Goyakla, which translates to "one who yawns." He belonged to the Bedincahe subsection, a small but fierce group within the larger Chiricahua Apache band. Growing up in a close-knit family, Geronimo had 3 brothers and 4 sisters, all of whom contributed to the rich tapestry of his early life. From a young age, Geronimo was immersed in the Apache way of life, which emphasized resilience, resourcefulness, and a profound connection to the land. The Chiricahua Apaches were known for their deep understanding of their environment, skilled hunting practices, and their ability to navigate the rugged terrain of the Southwest. This upbringing would later shape Geronimo's character and his legendary status as a warrior and leader. As he grew older, Geronimo became increasingly aware of the tensions between his people and outside forces, particularly the Mexican government and American settlers encroaching on Apache lands. These tensions would ultimately culminate in a series of conflicts, shaping the course of his life and the destiny of the Apache people. The events surrounding his family's massacre would mark a turning point, igniting his fierce spirit and resolve to fight for his people and their way of life. Thus began the saga of Geronimo, a figure who would become synonymous with resistance and resilience in the face of overwhelming adversity. As a young boy, Geronimo learned to cultivate crops such as corn, beans, squash, and peppers in the fertile, well-watered lands of his homeland. However, it quickly became apparent to his fellow Bedonkohe Apaches that he possessed a unique gift for foresight. Recognizing this ability, they trained him as a shaman, teaching him sacred songs and prayers that would enable him to interpret visions and communicate with the spiritual world. By the time he came of age, Geronimo had also developed notable skills in hunting. At just 17 years old, he was admitted to the Council of Warriors, a significant honor that not only acknowledged his capabilities but also permitted him to marry. This was a period of intense conflict for the Apache people, as they were engaged in battles against various adversaries: the Mexicans to the south, the Americans to the north, and neighboring tribes like the Comanche and Navajo. Demonstrating his bravery and tactical prowess, Geronimo successfully led 4 raids against these tribes that year, solidifying his reputation as a fierce warrior. Around this time, Geronimo fell deeply in love with a woman named Elope. The two married and began a family, welcoming 3 children into their lives. This period of Geronimo's life was marked not only by his burgeoning skills as a warrior and shaman but also by the joys and challenges of family life amid a backdrop of constant warfare and struggle for survival. His early experiences shaped him into the legendary figure he would become, as he balanced his roles as both a family man and a fierce protector of his people. In the 1850s, Geronimo's band ventured into Old Mexico, where they were able to trade due to a peace treaty in place. However, tragedy struck near Cascade in Chihuahua when Mexican troops launched a surprise attack on the Apache camp while most of the men were away in town. Those who remained in the camp were brutally killed, including Geronimo's entire family. The devastating loss plunged him into deep mourning, following Apache traditions to honor the dead. During this period of grief, Geronimo claimed to have heard a voice that assured him he would never be killed by a gun. Inspired by this divine message, he donned war paint and rallied warriors from his own band as well as from neighboring Apache groups. Among them were the Badonkahe Apaches, led by Chief Menges Colorado, the Choctaw Apaches, under Chief Cochise, and the Nedna Apaches, commanded by Chief Hu. United by a common purpose, these warriors set out on the warpath, traversing approximately 45 miles each day. They moved swiftly, stopping only to rest and hunt, driven by Geronimo's desire for vengeance and justice. This coalition of Apache bands, ignited by loss and fueled by determination, was prepared to confront their enemies head-on, marking the beginning of Geronimo's legendary path as a fierce and relentless leader. Upon reaching the settlement of Arispe, Geronimo and his band found themselves faced with 8 companies of Mexican infantry. However, under Geronimo's fierce leadership and unparalleled bravery, the Apaches emerged victorious in the ensuing battle. Those who witnessed Geronimo's fearless charge into the fray, armed only with a knife, were deeply inspired by his audacity and skill. It was this remarkable display of courage that led them to request that he assume the role of war leader for their people. In the months that followed, Geronimo took on this mantle with a sense of purpose and determination. He led 2 significant raids against the Mexican forces, each time striking decisively and earning a reputation as a formidable adversary. During these confrontations, the Apaches honed their tactics, using their intimate knowledge of the land to outmaneuver and ambush the enemy. On their return from the second raid, Geronimo and his warriors spotted a group of Mexican soldiers moving northward. Seeing an opportunity, they decided to follow the soldiers, hoping to catch them off guard. However, the soldiers soon launched an attack on an Apache settlement, igniting a fierce skirmish that lasted an entire day. The fighting was intense, but ultimately, the Mexican troops chose to retreat, having suffered losses of their own. In this conflict, 8 Mexicans and 5 Apaches lost their lives, a testament to the ferocity and resolve of both sides. Around the same time, Geronimo and his band encountered white settlers for the first time. This meeting marked a significant moment in Geronimo's life, as it was a clash of cultures that held both potential for conflict and opportunities for understanding. The 2 groups found themselves unable to communicate verbally, but through gestures and expressions, they managed to establish a rudimentary form of friendship. This initial encounter would leave a lasting impression on Geronimo, revealing to him the complexities of the world beyond his people's traditional territory. As the months progressed, Geronimo's reputation continued to grow, not only among his own people but also among their enemies. His daring tactics and strategic thinking in the heat of battle garnered him respect and loyalty from the Apache tribes. The bond he formed with his warriors was deepened by shared experiences of hardship and survival in a landscape fraught with danger. While Geronimo led his people in their struggles, the backdrop of mounting tensions between the Apaches and the Mexican government continued to shape their reality. The Apaches were constantly on guard, aware that each encounter with both Mexican troops and American settlers could quickly escalate into violence. Nonetheless, Geronimo remained resolute in his commitment to protect his people and their way of life, embracing his role as a leader during a tumultuous period in their history. Through these experiences, Geronimo would continue to develop not only as a warrior but also as a symbol of Apache resistance against oppression. His journey was just beginning, marked by a series of battles, alliances, and pivotal encounters that would define the legacy he would leave behind. The Apache people established a camp near a group of settlers who were busy measuring land for their claims. In this early encounter, the two groups engaged in trade, with the settlers exchanging goods for items the Apaches offered. During these exchanges, the settlers also handed over money, which the Apaches didn't fully understand at the time. However, they later learned from the neighboring Navajo that this currency held significant value. Geronimo, reflecting on the encounter, remarked that these settlers were good men, expressing sorrow when they departed to ride westward. This initial interaction highlighted the complexity of relationships between the Apaches and the incoming settlers, blending curiosity with cautious optimism. As time went on, Geronimo dedicated his life to battling those he considered enemies. He became a prominent leader within the Apache community, known for his fierce determination and tactical acumen. Geronimo organized numerous war parties, leading small, agile teams composed of anywhere from 5 to 30 warriors. These groups specialized in conducting rapid and surprise raids into Mexican territory, where they targeted military installations, border settlements, and supply trains. The operations led by Geronimo were characterized by their swift execution and cunning strategy. The Apaches would strike quickly, often catching their enemies off guard, then execute precise attacks designed to maximize impact while minimizing risk. In these raids, they focused on killing soldiers and seizing supplies, targeting weapons, guns, horses, cattle, and food. Each successful raid provided not only necessary resources for survival but also boosted the morale of the Apache warriors and their community. Geronimo's tactics revolved around exploiting the terrain and the element of surprise. The rugged landscapes of their homeland allowed the Apaches to move stealthily and evade capture after each assault. This guerrilla warfare style made it difficult for larger Mexican or American forces to mount effective counter-offensives. The raids became essential not just for the acquisition of supplies, but also as a means of asserting their resistance against encroaching threats. In these tumultuous times, Geronimo emerged not only as a military leader but also as a symbol of Apache resilience. His relentless pursuit of justice for his people and his commitment to their way of life fueled his reputation as a formidable adversary. As he continued to lead war parties into Mexican territory, the stories of his exploits spread, reinforcing the Apache legacy of bravery and defiance. The Apaches lived in a constant state of alert, aware that each foray into hostile territory could lead to retaliation. Despite this, Geronimo and his warriors remained undeterred, driven by a fierce sense of duty to protect their people and reclaim what they felt was rightfully theirs. Their raids were not merely acts of violence, they were profound statements against oppression and a testament to their enduring spirit. As Geronimo navigated the shifting landscape of conflict, the relationships between the Apache, the settlers, and the Mexican government became increasingly complicated. The fleeting moments of camaraderie and trade were often overshadowed by the realities of war and the struggle for survival. Yet, through it all, Geronimo's leadership and unyielding resolve stood as a beacon for his people, inspiring them to continue their fight against those who sought to displace them. Wounded numerous times in battle, Geronimo emerged not only as a fierce warrior but also as an adept tactician, teaching his fellow Apache warriors the art of invisibility. He trained them to slip away into the rugged canyons and mountainous terrain, using the landscape to their advantage when pursued. This skill proved invaluable, as they could strike quickly and from a distance, leaving their enemies disoriented and unable to retaliate effectively. A pivotal event in the ongoing conflict between the Apache and the U.S. Army occurred in February 1861 and is now known as the Bascom Affair. Lieutenant George Bascom was dispatched with orders to recover livestock and a young boy who had been kidnapped by members of the Chiricahua Apache tribe, which was led by the formidable Chief Cochise. The backdrop of the Bascom affair was already fraught with tension and mistrust between the Apache and American forces, as hostilities had escalated due to a series of misunderstandings and violent encounters. Upon reaching the Apache camp, Bascom took a confrontational stance. He believed that his mission required decisive action, so he detained Chief Cochise, who had been at the heart of the negotiations regarding the recovery of the livestock and the kidnapped boy. During these negotiations, Cochise vehemently denied that his people had committed any wrongdoing, insisting that they had no part in the abduction of the boy. This denial was an attempt to assert his people's honor and defend their actions against the encroaching American forces. However, tensions escalated further when Cochise managed to escape from captivity. In retaliation for his detention, he and his warriors took hostages of their own, capturing several Americans. This cycle of hostages and escalating violence marked a turning point in the relationship between the Chiricahua Apaches and the U.S. government. Tragically, all hostages taken during this conflict were later killed, exacerbating the animosity on both sides. The fallout from the Bascom affair initiated a prolonged period of bloody hostilities between the Chiricahua Apaches and the United States, which would last for nearly 25 years. This marked the beginning of a personal and bitter war between Chief Cochise and the U.S. Army, characterized by a series of violent encounters and retaliatory strikes. Cochise, known for his fierce resolve and strategic brilliance, became a rallying figure for the Apache as they sought to defend their homeland against what they perceived as unjust aggression. Throughout this decade-long conflict, both sides suffered significant losses. The U.S. Army, eager to assert control over the region and protect its interests, deployed more troops to the area. They attempted to subdue the Apache resistance through military force, yet Geronimo's teachings on stealth and ambush tactics empowered his people to strike back with cunning and ferocity. The Apache warriors, familiar with their ancestral lands, utilized their knowledge of the rugged terrain to launch surprise attacks, targeting supply trains and military outposts. This guerrilla warfare approach frustrated American forces, who struggled to combat the elusive and resourceful Apache fighters. Geronimo's leadership and tactical acumen played a crucial role in these encounters, as he inspired his fellow warriors to adopt strategies that emphasized mobility and stealth. The Bascom affair and its aftermath set a precedent for the escalating conflict between the Chiricahua Apaches and the U.S. government. As the years passed, the brutality of the encounters only deepened the divide between the two groups. Cochise and his warriors were driven by a desire to protect their way of life, while the U.S. Army remained resolute in their mission to exert control over the territory. The ensuing violence and bloodshed would have lasting repercussions for both the Apache and the American military, shaping the course of history in the Southwest and leaving an indelible mark on the relationships between indigenous peoples and settlers in the region. This long and tumultuous period of conflict underscored the deep-seated tensions that arose from differing values, beliefs, and ways of life. Following the tumultuous events of the Bascom affair, the native tribes of the region, including the Apache, reached a consensus. They would no longer maintain friendly relations with white settlers. This decision marked the beginning of a long and bitter struggle characterized by sporadic violence and conflict. The ensuing years saw a relentless cycle of attacks and counterattacks. Sometimes the Apaches would strike against American soldiers, while at other times, the U.S. Army would retaliate against Apache bands in efforts to quell the uprising. In 1862 and 1863, Geronimo emerged as a prominent leader during this turbulent period, directing two significant raids into Mexican territory. These raids were marked by a strategic focus on acquiring goods and resources essential for the survival of the Apache people. The Apache successfully seized large quantities of supplies from Mexican settlements, bolstering their resources and demonstrating their resilience against both Mexican and American forces. During one of these raids, Geronimo's warriors even managed to repel a counterattack, showcasing their tactical prowess and commitment to defending their territory and people. However, not all encounters ended in success for the Apache. In 1863, the chief of the Membrano Apache, Mongas, Colorado, sought to negotiate a peace treaty with American settlers in the hopes of establishing a more stable existence for his people. He believed that diplomacy might offer a path toward coexistence, providing the Apache with necessary supplies and a degree of protection in exchange for peace. Mongas, Colorado was promised blankets, flour, beef, and various supplies, a tempting offer that reflected the settlers' desire to maintain a semblance of control over the situation. Accompanied by 3 of his warriors, Mongas, Colorado approached the American camp under a flag of truce. However, he was wary of potential deception, having learned from past experiences that promises made by American settlers could easily be broken. Sensing a trap, he made the fateful decision to send his warriors back to camp, opting to enter the American encampment alone. Tragically, this decision would cost him his life. Upon entering the American camp, Mongas, Colorado was met with hostility rather than the promised peace. The Americans, perhaps feeling threatened by the presence of the chief, did not honor the terms of the truce. Instead, they killed him, a shocking betrayal that sent shockwaves through the Apache community. The death of Mongas, Colorado intensified the already existing animosity between the Apache and the Americans, further solidifying the resolve of the native tribes to resist colonization. In the aftermath of Mongas, Colorado's death, the Apache united in their fury, vowing to continue their fight against the encroaching settlers and the U.S. military. Geronimo, in particular, emerged as a key figure in this resistance. His earlier success in raids and his strategic mind made him a natural leader, galvanizing the Apache forces and rallying them against a common enemy. The betrayal of Mongas, Colorado fueled the Apaches' desire for vengeance, igniting a fierce commitment to their cause. The years that followed were marked by escalating violence as both sides engaged in a brutal cycle of retaliation. The Apache employed guerrilla tactics, leveraging their knowledge of the rugged terrain to outmaneuver and surprise American forces. This conflict would continue to shape the lives of the Apache people and their relationship with the encroaching settlers, defining a period of struggle and resistance that would last for decades. As the war dragged on, it became increasingly clear that the Apache were not only fighting for their land but also for their identity and way of life. The death of leaders like Mongas, Colorado underscored the sacrifices made by the Apache in their efforts to protect their people. Geronimo's leadership and the resilience of the Apache would go down in history as a testament to their enduring spirit and resistance against overwhelming odds, forever etching their legacy into the fabric of American history. After the tragic death of Mongas, Colorado, the Apache community found themselves in disarray and under increasing pressure from U.S. Army attacks. In the wake of this loss, Geronimo was chosen as the new chief, taking on the mantle of leadership during one of the most tumultuous periods in Apache history. The situation was dire. The constant assaults from the U.S. military were compounded by a severe shortage of supplies, making survival increasingly challenging for the Apache people. In search of safety and resources, Geronimo and his band made the difficult decision to break camp and retreat. During their withdrawal, they faced multiple attacks from U.S. troops, yet Geronimo's leadership and the resilience of his warriors allowed them to navigate these challenges. They eventually sought refuge with Chief Victorio and the Chichen Apaches at Hot Springs, New Mexico. Geronimo later reflected on this period in his autobiography, recalling it as one of the most pleasant times of his life. The bond that formed between the two Apache bands during this time was significant, as they worked together to share resources and strategize for their future. By 1864, the Apaches decided it was time to return to their ancestral lands. However, safety remained their paramount concern. To protect their families from the persistent threats posed by both Mexican and American forces, the Apache devised a clever strategy. Before embarking on raids, they would ensure the safety of their families by scattering them to various locations. This tactic made it exceedingly difficult for enemy forces to track them, thereby reducing the risk of encountering their families during the tumultuous raids. Once the families were safely dispersed, the warriors would regroup at a predetermined camp, located approximately 40 to 50 miles away from their original settlement. This distance served a dual purpose. It provided a buffer against potential enemy pursuit and ensured that the warriors knew exactly where to find their loved ones upon their return from raiding parties. This strategy exemplified the Apaches' resourcefulness and adaptability in the face of overwhelming odds. The bond between the warriors and their families was crucial to Apache culture, emphasizing the importance of community and solidarity. While on raids, Geronimo and his warriors would often rely on the skills and knowledge they had honed over years of conflict. They employed guerrilla tactics, utilizing the rugged terrain of their homeland to their advantage. The ability to strike quickly and retreat into the safety of the mountains became a hallmark of their raids, allowing them to inflict damage on enemy settlements and secure necessary supplies. During these raids, the Apaches targeted not only Mexican settlements but also American supply trains. Their raids were characterized by their speed and stealth, often striking when the enemy was least prepared. Geronimo's reputation as a fierce and cunning leader grew as he led his warriors to success time and time again, bolstering morale within the Apache community and reaffirming their resolve to resist colonization. Throughout this tumultuous period, the Apache faced not only physical challenges but also the psychological toll of ongoing conflict. The loss of leaders like Mangas Colorado weighed heavily on their hearts, yet Geronimo's leadership inspired hope. He understood the significance of preserving Apache culture and the importance of maintaining their way of life against encroaching forces. As they navigated the complexities of survival in a hostile environment, the Apaches remained committed to their ancestral lands and to each other. Geronimo's leadership was marked by both strategic brilliance and a deep sense of responsibility toward his people. He recognized that the fight was not just about survival, it was about preserving their identity, culture, and way of life. The bonds forged during this period of hardship would shape the Apache people for generations to come. The legacy of Geronimo and his leadership would become a symbol of resistance, resilience, and the enduring spirit of the Apache people in their fight against oppression and the loss of their homeland. Furthermore, there was a strategic advantage to scattering their families before embarking on raids. If any hostile native tribe observed a large number of warriors departing from their camp, they might seize the opportunity to launch an attack. However, if they found the camp seemingly abandoned, their raid would likely falter. Over the next 4 years, Geronimo would lead 4 significant raids into Mexico, most of which proved successful. During these daring expeditions, his warriors acquired valuable goods, horses, and engaged in fierce battles against their enemies, further solidifying Geronimo's reputation as a formidable leader. Those who followed Geronimo often attributed to him a host of supernatural abilities. They believed he could heal the sick, manipulate the passage of time, evade bullets, summon rainstorms, and even see events occurring over great distances. This reverence for his supposed powers only bolstered his status among the Apache. One notable incident, recounted by Apache warrior Jason Bettsines, illustrates Geronimo's reputed abilities. During a raiding expedition, a group of warriors gathered around a campfire, sharing stories and resting from their journey. Suddenly, Geronimo experienced a vivid vision that U.S. troops had launched an attack on their base camp. This foresight prompted immediate action, showcasing not only Geronimo's strategic mind but also the deep trust his followers placed in his abilities. The warriors quickly mobilized, demonstrating the powerful connection between their leaders' perceived supernatural insights and their survival in a perilous environment. After arriving at the site several days later, the Apaches found that Geronimo's vision had indeed been accurate. The Americans had already captured their encampment. "I cannot explain it to this day," Jason Betzinas later wrote, "but I was there, and I saw it." This incident only added to Geronimo's growing legend as a leader with extraordinary foresight and connection to the spirit world. In 1872, the Apache settlement faced another challenge when Mexican troops launched an attack. However, the Apaches, under Geronimo's leadership, successfully defended their territory and defeated the invading forces. This victory further solidified their reputation as fierce and formidable warriors. The following year, Geronimo's band joined forces with the Nedna Apaches, led by Chief Hu, in the Sierra Madre Mountains of Mexico. In this rugged terrain, they engaged in a fierce battle against the Mexican forces. Despite being significantly outnumbered, approximately 60 Apaches confronted 2 companies of Mexican cavalry and emerged victorious, killing all the soldiers in the encounter. This stunning victory underscored the Apaches' tactical prowess and their ability to adapt to challenging situations. Throughout this tumultuous period, the Badonkahe Apaches maintained a unique lifestyle, oscillating between Arizona and Old Mexico. Their time in both regions allowed them to engage in trade and maintain alliances with neighboring tribes. Additionally, Geronimo and Chief Hu shared a close friendship, which fostered collaboration between their bands. This alliance was crucial in their ongoing resistance against Mexican and American encroachments, providing them with the strength and unity necessary to navigate the increasingly hostile landscape around them. Together, they formed a formidable force, united by their shared experiences and goals, continuing to fight for their rights and homeland. The bonds of friendship among the Apache leaders were a testament to their resilience and determination in the face of adversity. As they moved between the two territories, they forged a legacy of resistance and survival that would endure for generations. In the interim, 2 significant battles erupted between the Apaches and the Mexicans. In the first engagement, the Apaches emerged victorious, though they incurred some casualties in the process. The second battle, however, proved less favorable, as the Apaches found themselves forced to retreat into the rugged mountains, where they would spend months skirmishing with Mexican forces. Eventually, the ongoing conflict led both sides to seek a resolution, culminating in a peace treaty at Casas Grandes, Chihuahua, Mexico. Following negotiations, the terms of the agreement were established, and a trading of goods commenced. As a gesture of goodwill, the Mexicans offered mezcal to the Apaches. However, this seemingly friendly exchange quickly turned treacherous. Intoxicated by the alcohol, the Apaches were caught off guard. In a brutal surprise attack, Mexican soldiers killed 20 Apaches and captured many more, compelling the survivors to retreat once again into the safety of the mountains. The betrayal at Casas Grandes left a profound impact on the Apache leaders, particularly Cochise, the chief of the Chiricahua Apaches. In the wake of this treachery, Cochise sought a diplomatic resolution and arranged a meeting with U.S. General Oliver Howard. The 2 leaders engaged in discussions aimed at establishing peace between their respective factions. General Howard ultimately agreed to designate the Chiricahua's homeland as their official reservation, a crucial step toward granting the Apaches a sense of stability and security in a time of relentless conflict. This agreement represented a glimmer of hope for the Apaches amidst the tumultuous landscape they navigated, paving the way for a more structured coexistence with American forces. The establishment of the agency near Fort Bowie marked the beginning of a period of relative peace for the Chiricahua Apaches, who settled in the San Carlos Reservation. During this time, Geronimo held General Oliver Howard in high regard, recalling that all the native people respected him for his fairness and commitment to maintaining peace. The reservation provided the Apaches with a steady supply of food and resources, allowing them a reprieve from the hardships they had endured. However, this period of tranquility was short-lived. After General Howard was transferred, tensions on the reservation began to rise. Geronimo and the Badonkahe band, seeking better circumstances, relocated to Hot Springs on the Ojo Caliente Reservation, where they rejoined Victorio's band of Chichen Apaches. This movement was viewed as a violation of the terms set by U.S. authorities, leading to serious repercussions. In response, U.S. officials arrested Victorio, Geronimo, and 7 other Apaches, viewing their gathering as a significant threat to the peace efforts. While Victorio was eventually released, Geronimo faced a harsher fate. He was imprisoned for 4 months due to his departure from the San Carlos Reservation, highlighting the fragile nature of the peace that had been established. This incident underscored the precarious balance between the Apaches and U.S. authorities, a dynamic that would continue to evolve amidst ongoing conflicts and shifting alliances. Eventually, Geronimo and his band were forced back to the San Carlos Reservation as tensions escalated. The Ojo Caliente Reservation was closed, leading Victorio and his band to receive orders to relocate to San Carlos. However, they refused to comply and made a daring escape into the night. In response, the Army issued a directive to kill any Apache found outside the reservations, leading to a manhunt for the Chichen Apaches. Victorio and his warriors, numbering around 200, were relentlessly pursued across the southwest and into Mexico. Throughout their flight, they engaged in more than 20 skirmishes with U.S. and Mexican forces, fighting fiercely against overwhelming odds. Tragically, many of the warriors were eventually killed, and it was said that Victorio was the last one standing in this valiant struggle for survival. In 1883, driven by Geronimo's leadership and vision for freedom, hundreds of Apaches left the San Carlos Reservation, embarking on a journey southward. This mass exodus included many renowned warriors who sought to reclaim their autonomy and heritage. They settled in the rugged mountain ranges of Mexico, continuing to engage in skirmishes with the U.S. Army along the way. This movement was not just a flight from oppression but a fierce declaration of their will to resist and live according to their traditions, despite the mounting challenges they faced. At this point, the Chiricahua Apache population had dwindled to around 600 individuals. To survive, they ingeniously hid caches of food and supplies throughout the southwestern parts of Mexico, creating a network that would sustain them during their constant evasion of U.S. and Mexican forces. The situation intensified when the U.S. Army, frustrated by the Apaches' resilience, struck a deal with Mexican authorities that allowed troops to cross the border freely in their pursuit of the elusive natives. A particularly furious battle erupted south of Arispe, where the Mexican army mounted a concerted attack on the Apaches entrenched in the mountains. The clash raged from daybreak into the night, with both sides experiencing heavy losses. Amid the chaos of the battlefield, Geronimo exhibited remarkable bravery and tactical skill. He managed to navigate through enemy lines and came face to face with the Mexican general who was urging his officers to intensify their assault. In a bold move, Geronimo killed the general, a pivotal moment that shifted the momentum of the battle. The loss of their leader demoralized the Mexican troops, causing them to hesitate and weaken their offensive. As darkness enveloped the battlefield, Geronimo and his warriors seized the opportunity to escape. They set the dry grass ablaze, creating a smokescreen that concealed their retreat and confused their pursuers. This clever tactic allowed them to slip away into the night, preserving their strength for future confrontations. In the aftermath of this conflict, General George Crook was dispatched by the U.S. government to deal with the Apache situation. Unlike many of his predecessors, Crook approached the Apaches with a sense of respect and understanding. He recognized their fierce spirit and the hardships they faced, which fostered a complex relationship between the general and the native people. This mutual respect laid the groundwork for potential negotiations and a more peaceful resolution to the long-standing conflict, although the road ahead remained fraught with challenges for both sides. General George Crook recognized the formidable nature of the Apaches, famously remarking that the U.S. Army faced the tiger of the human species when confronting them. Despite being at a significant numerical disadvantage, Crook was determined to track down Geronimo. After some strategic maneuvering, Geronimo agreed to meet with Crook, resulting in a tentative agreement that the Chiricahua Apaches would relocate to a new reservation called Turkey Creek. However, life on a reservation was never suitable for Geronimo. His fierce spirit and independent nature clashed with the confinement that reservations represented. When rumors began circulating about plans to arrest him, he chose to escape once again. While most Chiricahua Apaches accepted life on the reservations, the remaining free members of the tribe retreated to the Sierra Madre Mountains, seeking refuge from the relentless pursuit of the U.S. Army. Crook renewed his efforts to capture Geronimo, who had become a symbol of Apache resistance. The stakes were high, and the U.S. government placed a staggering $25,000 bounty on Geronimo's head, a testament to both his notoriety and the fear he instilled in settlers and soldiers alike. As the summer of 1886 unfolded, anxiety swept through the Southwest. Communities lived in fear of Apache raids, knowing that Geronimo and his small band of warriors were still at large and capable of striking swiftly and decisively against any who crossed their path. This was a critical moment in the struggle for Apache autonomy, with Geronimo at the center of a battle not just for survival, but for the very identity and way of life of his people. By the summer of 1886, Geronimo and his final free band of Chiricahua Apaches had dwindled to just 37 individuals, 18 warriors, 13 women, and 6 children, including 2 infants. For 5 months, this small group eluded capture while an overwhelming force of approximately 5,000 U.S. Army soldiers, 3,000 Mexican soldiers, and fewer than 1,000 volunteer militia members sought to bring them to heel. As the situation escalated, General Nelson Miles replaced General George Crook, bringing with him a new strategy aimed at decisively ending Apache resistance. Miles made a controversial decision to transfer the 400 Chiricahua Apaches residing on the San Carlos Reservation to a prison in Florida. This drastic measure was intended to intimidate the remaining free Chiricahua, showcasing the lengths to which the U.S. government was willing to go to quell their spirit. Later that summer, Geronimo met with General Miles in a bid to negotiate a resolution. During this meeting, Miles promised Geronimo that his resisting band would be reunited with their families within 5 days and assured him that he would not face arrest. Faced with the prospect of reuniting with his loved ones and weary from years of relentless pursuit, Geronimo ultimately accepted the treaty and surrendered for the final time. This marked the end of a long and tumultuous chapter in Apache history, a poignant conclusion to Geronimo's fierce resistance and a significant moment in the broader narrative of Native American struggles against encroaching forces. Initially, the first group of Chiricahua Apaches was relocated to Florida, but they quickly suffered from malaria. As a result, they were moved to Alabama. Geronimo's group was also transferred to Florida, and after enduring 2 years of imprisonment, they too were moved to Alabama. Eventually, the families were reunited at last. Following their time in Alabama, the Apaches were relocated once more, this time to Oklahoma. During this period, Geronimo became a public figure, touring the nation and performing at various fairs and exhibitions, including the famed Buffalo Bill's Wild West show. One of his most notable public appearances occurred on March 4, 1905, when he participated in President Theodore Roosevelt's inaugural parade in Washington, D.C., standing alongside 5 other Native leaders. In his later years, Geronimo began exploring Christianity, seeking understanding and perhaps solace in a new faith. Throughout his life, he had 9 wives and fathered 7 children, leaving behind a legacy that intertwined both personal and cultural narratives. Tragically, in 1909, while returning from a night of drinking, Geronimo fell off his horse and landed in a ditch. This incident marked the decline of his health, culminating in his death in 1909. His life story remains a testament to resilience and the enduring spirit of the Apache people. Geronimo remained in the ditch until morning, where he contracted pneumonia. Tragically, he passed away just days later. Before his death, he expressed regret about surrendering, stating that he believed he should have fought until the end rather than capitulating. The federal government did not release the Chiricahua Apaches until 1913, 4 years after Geronimo's death. By that time, they were no longer considered prisoners of war. Of the freed Apaches, 1/3 chose to remain at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, while the remaining 2/3 relocated to the Mescalero Apache Reservation in New Mexico. This decision marked a significant shift for the Chiricahua people, as they sought to rebuild their lives and communities in the wake of years of conflict and upheaval.